Welcome back to this week's AMT Fresh Produce Market Report, proudly brought to you by Villa Crop Protection. The market is under serious pressure and there are a few big forces driving it at the moment. We're coming off nearly 2 months of oversupply, Black Friday is pulling spending away from essentials, and the rain and G20 cleanup in Joburg have slowed demand even further. On the fruit side, table grapes are grabbing all the attention at the moment. The new season is kicked off, volumes are climbing fast and prices are already taking a knock. If this pace continues, we could even see grapes dipping below the 20 Rand mark before the year ends. Let's unpack what this all means for the next 2 weeks. Over the past week, potato prices maintained its levels, although we saw a 10% drop in volumes traded. The latest price traded on 44.96 per 10 kg. Tomato volumes also dropped by about 6% the past week, which resulted in 6% higher prices on 9.65 per kilogram. Onion prices, however, continued in its downward trend, decreasing by 3% to 36.66 per 10 kg. Carrots traded 2% lower on 4.05 cents per kilogram, peppers dropped by 30% to 13.25 and cabbages decreased by 10% to 1.37 per kilogram. Sweet potatoes fell to 5.82, also 11% lower week on week. Spinach increased by about 2% to 2.13 per kilogram and butternuts dropped by 5% to 4.88. Pumpkins also showed a notable decline, falling by 13% to 4.35 per kilogram. Garlic prices moved mostly sideways again, trading on 43.48, while green beans jumped to 11.03 cents and cucumbers also declined to 11.25 per kilogram. With world-class solutions like Masterlock, tailored for South African conditions, Villa helps you manage risk and increase productivity with research-backed confidence. Over the last month or two, the market has generally been quite heavily oversupplied, and that really keeps a lot of pressure on most of the prices. The big problem at the moment is that there are just so many alternatives available on the market. So even when there's a shortage in one or two of the commodities, the upward potential is still very limited because buyers can easily switch to something else or something cheaper. Now, as we move closer to payday, we would usually expect demand to start picking up a bit towards the weekend, and that would normally help to support prices. But we're honestly a bit skeptical that this will actually happen over the next 2 weeks, and that there are 3 very important reasons why. The first one is, of course, the current oversupply. There's just too much product, and that alone limits any real upward movement in prices. The second factor is Black Friday. People tend to spend a lot of money on non-essential things during this period, and that actually reduces the demand for essential items like food. Over the last few years, we've seen that Black Friday is not necessarily good for fresh produce prices. In fact, it often has the opposite effect. And then the third factor is the rain and the G20 cleanup in Joburg. The cleanup resulted in a number of hawker traders being removed from their trading spots, and we know from experience, especially during the COVID lockdowns, that when hawker traders and informal traders aren't active, average prices can fall sharply on the markets. On top of that, high rainfall usually slows down demand as well. So with the market already this oversupplied, we really hope trading can continue without further restrictions, especially as the G20 concluded over the weekend. Any additional disruption, especially now, can put even more pressure on prices in an already tough environment. Please leave me a comment if there is a specific commodity you'd like us to discuss in next week's episode. Moving over to the fruit markets, however, bananas increased to 11.49 Rand per kilogram and is about 20% lower compared to a year ago. Apples traded higher at 13.18 Rand, while pears jumped to 10.06 Rand per kilogram. Over in the citrus market, oranges jumped to 8.61 Rand per kilogram, lemons decreased to 8.21 Rand, naartjies jumped to 9.92 Rand, and grapefruits increased slightly to 9.30 Rand per kilogram. Avocados stayed on 29 Rand 26 per kilogram, while table grapes fell sharply, trading 24% lower week on week on 46 Rand 57. Pineapples increased to 11 Rand 65, blueberries dropped to 39 Rand 62, while watermelons dropped to 1 Rand 5 cents per kilogram last week. The biggest movement in the fruit market this week was definitely on the table grapes. Prices came under some severe pressure as the new season kicked off over the past 2 weeks. We started a bit slower compared to last year this time, but from here on we're expecting volumes to increase sharply through December. And that's where the challenge comes in. If these volumes pick up as expected, prices can easily dip below the 20 Rand mark towards the end of this year. That's the risk we're looking at right now. In terms of recovery, we'll likely only see prices improving again around April next year once local supply starts dropping off. Until then, we can expect the market to stay under quite a bit of pressure as we usually see over this period of the year. So that's your AMT Weekly Fresh Produce Outlook made possible by Villa Crop Protection. Remember to follow AMT on all our social media platforms for daily market updates. And we'll see you next week with the latest market trends again.